I'm General Carmen Martinez, 38, standing in my dress blues at my nephew Miguel's high school graduation, watching my family treat me with the same condescending affection they've shown for 20 years, patting my shoulder, calling me their little soldier, and asking when I'm going to settle down and start a real career. They have no idea that the woman they see as their cute little sister playing army is actually General Carmen Martinez, the youngest female general in the U.S. Army, commanding the 82nd Airborne Division, overseeing military operations that shape global security, and holding a rank achieved by fewer than 300 people in the entire United States military. Tonight, when the graduation keynote speaker, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, recognizes me in the audience and reveals my true position to 3,000 people including my shocked family, everything they believe about ambition, achievement, and what it means to command respect is about to be rewritten with the precision of a military operation. Before I tell you how one moment of recognition turned their graduation ceremony into the revelation of a lifetime, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Because this story proves that sometimes the people who seem to be playing games are actually changing the rules of the game itself. Growing up as Carmen Martinez in a traditional Mexican-American family in San Antonio, Texas, meant understanding that success was measured by stability, family devotion, and following the paths that previous generations had carved out through decades of hard work and sacrifice. My father, Roberto Martinez, had built a successful construction business from nothing, starting as a day laborer and eventually employing 50 people in projects across South Texas. My mother, Sophia, had worked as a nurse for 30 years while raising 5 children and managing our household with the kind of efficiency that would have impressed any military logistics officer. In our family, the roadmap to success was clearly defined and rarely questioned. My 3 older brothers, Carlos, Diego, and Antonio, were expected to either join my father's construction business or pursue careers in engineering, medicine, or law that would bring stability and respect to our family name. My younger sister Isabella and I were encouraged to excel in school, but with the understanding that our ultimate success would be measured by our ability to marry well, raise children who would honor our family's values, and maintain the cultural traditions that had sustained us through generations of challenges. But from my earliest memories, I was drawn to structure, strategy, and leadership in ways that didn't fit neatly into the conventional expectations for young Latinos in 1980s San Antonio. While my siblings played games that prepared them for traditional adult roles, I organized elaborate war games in our backyard, created detailed battle plans for neighborhood competitions, and read military history books that I checked out from the library when no one was paying attention. The fascination began when I was 8 years old, during a family visit to the Alamo where a park ranger gave a detailed presentation about military strategy, leadership under pressure, and the tactical decisions that had shaped the famous battle. While other children grew bored with the technical discussion, I found myself completely absorbed by the complex relationships between terrain, logistics, troop movements, and command decisions that determined the outcome of military engagements. Mija, my father said when he found me studying a diagram of the Alamo's defensive positions long after the tour had ended, "What are you doing here? The rest of the family is ready to leave." "Papa, I'm trying to understand why they positioned the cannons here instead of there, and why they didn't have better escape routes planned. The tactics they used don't make sense for the situation they were in." He looked at the diagram I was studying, then at my serious expression, and smiled with the kind of indulgent affection reserved for children's inexplicable interests. "Carmen, that happened a long time ago. You don't need to worry about military strategy. Those are things for soldiers to think about." But I was already hooked. The idea that victory or defeat could depend on careful planning, strategic thinking, and the ability to make sound decisions under extreme pressure filled me with excitement that no traditional childhood activity could match. My parents indulged what they saw as an unusual but harmless childhood phase, allowing me to read military history books and watch documentaries about famous battles and military leaders. But as I grew older and my interest in military science only intensified, they began to worry that I was developing obsessions that would interfere with more appropriate concerns. "Carmen spends too much time thinking about wars and soldiers," my mother would tell relatives when they asked about my interests. We're trying to encourage her to focus on subjects that will help her build a normal life. The comment was always delivered with love and genuine concern for my future happiness, but it revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of what I was actually learning through my military studies. Far from being violent fantasies or escapist entertainment, military science required advanced mathematics, strategic analysis, and leadership principles that would prove invaluable in any professional career. But explaining this to family members who had no frame of reference for military careers was nearly impossible. When I would try to share what I was learning about logistics, strategic planning, or leadership under pressure, their eyes would glaze over and the conversation would quickly shift to more familiar topics. The gap between my interests and my family's understanding widened significantly during my high school years, when I became involved in the junior ROTC program and started spending afternoons learning military drill, studying military history, and participating in leadership exercises that challenged me in ways that regular academics never had. The ROTC program was led by Master Sergeant Patricia Williams, a career soldier who had served in multiple combat zones before transitioning to education. Under her guidance, I learned military protocol, studied tactical principles, and developed leadership skills through exercises that required coordinating teams of students in complex scenarios. More importantly, she introduced me to the possibility that military service could be more than a temporary adventure, that it could be a career that combined strategic analysis with practical leadership, international travel with meaningful service, and personal challenge with national purpose. Martinez, she said during my junior year, after I had spent months excelling in every aspect of ROTC training, you have natural leadership ability and an analytical mind that's perfect for military service. Have you considered pursuing a military academy appointment or applying for Army ROTC scholarships in college? The suggestion opened possibilities I had never seriously considered. Military academies and ROTC programs seemed like opportunities for people from different backgrounds, with different kinds of family support and financial resources than I had access to. But Sergeant Williams helped me understand that the military was actively seeking talented people from diverse backgrounds, and that my academic achievements and leadership potential were exactly what military leaders were looking for in the next generation of officers. The Army isn't just for people who grew up in military families, she explained. Some of the best officers come from backgrounds that give them different perspectives on leadership, problem-solving, and working with diverse groups of people. The conversation with my parents about pursuing military service in college was more difficult than any I had ever initiated. It took place on a Sunday evening in March, with the sounds of my mother's cooking filling our kitchen and my younger siblings doing homework at the dining room table. Mija, my father said after I had explained my interest in applying for Army ROTC scholarships, the military is a good way for young people to get training and education, but it's not a career for someone with your intelligence and potential. You should use military service as a stepping stone to something more permanent and secure. Papa, military service can be a career. Officers can serve for 20 or 30 years, advancing to senior leadership positions that require the same kind of skills that make business people successful. My mother was more direct in her concerns. Carmen, military service means traveling constantly, never settling down, and always being ready to go to dangerous places. How will you build a family and maintain relationships if you're always deployed somewhere? The questions were reasonable and reflected genuine concern for my future happiness and security. Military service did indeed require sacrifices that could affect personal relationships and family planning in ways that more conventional careers didn't demand. But I had done enough research to know that military service could provide opportunities for leadership, education, and personal growth that were available in few other careers. More importantly, I had come to understand that my fascination with military science wasn't just about personal interest. It was about serving something larger than myself and using whatever talents I had to protect and defend the values I had been raised to cherish. The compromise we reached felt reasonable at the time. I would pursue Army ROTC at the University of Texas, which offered excellent programs and allowed me to remain close to home where my family could provide support and guidance. If I found military service rewarding and could identify clear career paths, they would support my continued service. If not, I could use my military training and education to transition to civilian careers that offered more conventional security. College was a revelation that confirmed everything I had hoped about military science while challenging me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The ROTC program was more demanding than anything I had experienced, requiring mastery of military history, tactics, leadership principles, and technical skills that pushed my intellectual and physical capabilities to their limits. But it was also the first time I had been surrounded by people who shared my fascination with military strategy and understood the principles of leadership that made effective military operations possible. My fellow cadets came from diverse backgrounds, but we were united by curiosity about military science and determination to earn commissions as Army officers. The breakthrough in my understanding of what a military career could look like came during my sophomore year, when I was selected for a summer internship at Fort Bragg, home of the 82nd Airborne Division. The program was designed to give undergraduate cadets exposure to active military units and the chance to observe professional soldiers conducting real training and operational planning. My assignment was to the Division Operations Center, where I worked with staff officers who planned training exercises, coordinated equipment maintenance, and managed the complex logistics that kept an airborne division ready for deployment anywhere in the world on short notice. For the first time, I saw how the abstract principles I had been studying translated into practical decisions that affected thousands of soldiers and millions of dollars worth of equipment. The work was everything I had dreamed it could be: intellectually challenging, strategically important, and directly connected to national security objectives that protected American interests around the world. Cadet Martinez, said Major Jennifer Thompson, the operations officer who supervised my internship, you have an intuitive understanding of military planning and logistics that usually takes years to develop. Have you thought about what you want to specialize in after you receive your commission? The question forced me to think more specifically about how I wanted to contribute to military operations. There were dozens of specializations within the Army, each requiring different skills and offering different opportunities to impact military effectiveness. After extensive research and conversations with officers from various specialties, I decided to pursue military intelligence, the field that involved analyzing threats, coordinating information from multiple sources, and providing strategic assessments that shaped military planning at the highest levels. The decision felt right because it combined my love of strategic analysis with the technical skills necessary to understand complex security challenges. Military intelligence officers were the people who figured out what enemies were planning, how to counter emerging threats, and where American forces could be most effectively employed to protect national interests. But when I tried to explain this specialization to my family, their responses suggested that they saw it as evidence of my continued inability to focus on practical concerns. Military intelligence sounds very theoretical, my mother said during one of our weekly phone calls. Are you sure you wouldn't be better off specializing in something more hands-on, like logistics or administration? Mama, military intelligence is hands-on. It's about solving real problems that determine whether military operations succeed or fail. Intelligence officers are the ones who figure out how to accomplish impossible missions with available resources. But it sounds like the kind of work that requires security clearances and constant travel to dangerous places. What if you want to get married and have children? How will you maintain a family life if you're always working on classified projects? The concern was understandable but revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of how modern military careers had evolved. By the early 2000s, military service included opportunities for specialization, advanced education, and leadership development that created diverse career paths for officers with different interests and capabilities. But explaining the complexity of modern military careers to family members who had no framework for understanding military organization, professional development, or the relationship between military service and civilian career preparation was nearly impossible. It was easier to let them maintain their concerns than to constantly defend career choices they couldn't appreciate. My commission as a second lieutenant in military intelligence came with assignment to the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, New York, where I would spend the next 3 years learning to be a professional soldier while developing expertise in intelligence analysis and strategic planning. The transition from college student to Army officer was more challenging than I had anticipated, requiring adjustment to military culture, mastery of technical systems, and development of leadership skills that would allow me to command soldiers who were often older and more experienced than I was. But I also discovered that I had natural aptitude for military leadership that surprised both my supervisors and myself. I learned to brief senior officers, to analyze complex intelligence data, and to coordinate with other military units and government agencies in ways that contributed to operational success. Most importantly, I experienced the sense of purpose and mission that came from serving something larger than personal advancement. Military service provided clear objectives, meaningful challenges, and the knowledge that my work contributed to protecting American lives and interests in ways that few civilian careers could match. The promotion to first lieutenant came with assignment to a forward-deployed intelligence unit that provided tactical support to special operations forces conducting missions in Afghanistan. The work required coordinating with CIA operatives, analyzing intercepted communications, and providing real-time intelligence support to teams operating in extremely dangerous conditions. It was the most challenging and rewarding work I had ever done, requiring every aspect of my education and training while pushing me to develop new skills in cross-cultural communication, rapid analysis, and decision-making under pressure that could literally determine life or death for American soldiers. But it was also work that remained largely invisible to my family, who continued to see my military career as evidence of my inability to settle down and focus on more conventional priorities. Carmen still deployed overseas. My mother would tell relatives when they asked about my career, the tone suggesting that military service was a phase I was going through rather than a serious professional responsibility. The misunderstanding was particularly painful during family gatherings when I was home on leave, where my achievements in intelligence analysis and military leadership were acknowledged politely but never celebrated or understood. My brothers would share updates about their conventional careers, Carlos's success in the construction business, Diego's advancement in engineering, Antonio's medical practice, while my accomplishments in military planning and counterterrorism operations were met with polite interest but no real comprehension of their significance. "We're proud of Carmen's service," relatives would say, "but we hope she finds time to focus on building a personal life eventually." The assumption that my career was somehow incompatible with personal fulfillment was constant but subtle, expressed through concerned questions about my social life, my plans for marriage and family, and my long-term happiness. But the intelligence work I was doing was some of the most fulfilling of my life, combining analytical challenges with the knowledge that I was contributing to missions that saved American lives and protected national security interests. The counterterrorism operations I supported represented some of the most important military activities being conducted anywhere in the world. My role in providing intelligence support felt like the culmination of everything I had worked towards since first becoming fascinated with military strategy as an 8-year-old girl studying battle diagrams at the Alamo. The promotion to captain came with assignment to the Pentagon, where I worked in the Intelligence Directorate providing strategic analysis for senior military leaders and coordinating intelligence sharing between different military services and government agencies. The position required briefing generals and admirals, representing the Army in meetings with CIA and NSA officials, and contributing to strategic planning for military operations that would shape American foreign policy for years to come. It was a level of responsibility I had never imagined achieving so early in my career, but it also represented recognition from senior military leaders that I had developed expertise and judgment that were essential to national security planning. But my family's understanding of this promotion remained limited by their continued perception of military service as temporary employment rather than a serious profession with opportunities for advancement and specialization. Carmen got promoted again in the Army. My father told neighbors, "She's doing well in her military job," but we hope she'll consider transitioning to civilian work eventually so she can settle down and start a family. The response was loving but revealed how little they understood about what I was actually doing or why it mattered to anyone beyond my personal career advancement. As a Pentagon staff officer, I was responsible for analyzing global security threats, coordinating intelligence operations across multiple time zones, and providing strategic assessments that influenced decisions about troop deployments, equipment procurement, and alliance relationships that affected millions of people. The work required testifying before congressional committees about intelligence budgets, meeting with foreign military officials to coordinate joint operations, and making recommendations that would determine how American military power was employed to protect national interests. But these responsibilities remained largely invisible to family members who continued to see my career as evidence of my continued focus on activities that prevented me from achieving conventional success. The transformation in my career trajectory came during my 8th year of service, when I was selected for promotion to major and assignment as the Deputy Operations Officer for the 82nd Airborne Division, one of the Army's most prestigious units and the military formation that provides rapid response capability for global contingencies. The position required managing the training and readiness of 15,000 soldiers, coordinating with other military services and government agencies, and maintaining the capability to deploy anywhere in the world within 48 hours to respond to international crises. It was an opportunity one had never expected and wasn't sure I was qualified for, but it was also the chance to influence military operations at the highest levels and to lead some of the Army's most elite soldiers. The appointment was temporary initially, intended to provide experience in division-level operations during a 6-month rotation, but it became permanent when my performance demonstrated that I had the strategic thinking and leadership skills necessary to manage complex military operations. At 32, I became one of the youngest majors ever assigned to such a senior position in the 82nd Airborne Division, responsible for operations that directly supported American foreign policy objectives and could determine the success or failure of military missions around the world. The promotion was covered in military publications and professional journals, with articles describing my background in intelligence analysis, my role in counterterrorism operations, and my rapid advancement through increasingly responsible positions. But my family's understanding of what this promotion meant remained limited by their lack of familiarity with military organization, strategic planning, or the significance of the 82nd Airborne Division's role in national defense. Carmen got another promotion in the Army, my mother told relatives. She's doing very well in her military work, but it means even more responsibility and longer hours. We worry about her taking on too much when she should be thinking about her personal life. The response was predictable but frustrating because it reduced my professional achievements to evidence of personal imbalance, success in work that somehow prevented success in more important areas of life. As Deputy Operations Officer for the 82nd Airborne Division, I was responsible for leading America's rapid response capability, planning and executing deployments that could prevent international conflicts or respond to humanitarian disasters anywhere in the world. The work required coordinating with the State Department about diplomatic implications of military deployments, briefing the Secretary of Defense about operational capabilities and limitations, and making strategic decisions that would determine whether American military power was employed effectively to protect national interests. But these responsibilities remained invisible to family members who continued to see my career as evidence of my continued focus on activities that were important to me personally but weren't building toward anything that would provide long-term security or happiness. The promotion to Lieutenant Colonel came during my 12th year of service, when I was selected to command a brigade within the 82nd Airborne Division, responsibility for 3,000 soldiers and the capability to conduct independent military operations anywhere in the world. The appointment represented everything I had worked toward during my military career, the chance to lead elite soldiers in missions that protected American lives and interests, to apply everything I had learned about strategy and leadership in the most challenging operational environments, and to contribute to national security in ways that few people ever have the opportunity to experience. But it also meant accepting a level of responsibility that would require total commitment to mission success, often at the expense of personal relationships and family connections that most people consider essential to a fulfilling life. The conversation with my parents about accepting the brigade command was both exciting and heartbreaking. They were proud of my achievements and grateful that I had found success in military service, but they remained puzzled by my choice to continue pursuing advancement in what seemed like an extremely demanding career that left little time for conventional personal fulfillment. "We're happy that you've done well in the Army," my father said when I called to share the news about my promotion, "but we hope this leads to opportunities to transition to civilian work eventually. Maybe you could use your military experience to find a good job in San Antonio where you could be closer to family." Papa, commanding a brigade in the 82nd Airborne Division is one of the most important jobs in the entire military. This position will let me lead soldiers who protect American interests around the world. I understand that you believe this work is important, Mija, but we worry about you building your entire life around something so demanding. What happens when you want to get married and have children? How will you balance brigade command with family responsibilities? The questions reflected genuine concern for my future happiness, but they also revealed how different our perspectives had become on what constituted meaningful work and long-term fulfillment. My first year as a brigade commander required deploying to Iraq, where my unit was responsible for training Iraqi security forces, conducting counterinsurgency operations, and coordinating with civilian agencies to support political reconstruction efforts. The deployment was the most challenging experience of my military career, requiring leadership in combat conditions, coordination with international partners, and strategic decision-making that affected both military operations and diplomatic relationships. But it was also the most meaningful work I had ever done, demonstrating that everything I had learned about military science, strategic analysis, and leadership could be applied to real-world challenges that determined whether democratic institutions could be established in post-conflict societies. The success of our deployment was documented in military after-action reports, diplomatic assessments, and congressional testimony that highlighted the 82nd Airborne Division's contribution to strategic objectives in Iraq. But my family's understanding of this success remained limited by their continued perception of military deployments as dangerous assignments that prevented me from focusing on more important personal priorities. "Carmen's back from Iraq," my mother would tell neighbors. "She did very well in her military assignment, but we're relieved that she's safe and hope she'll consider whether it's time to think about settling down." The comment was well-intentioned but revealed how little they understood about what I had actually accomplished or why it mattered to anyone beyond my personal career development. The promotion to colonel came with assignment as Deputy Commanding General of the 82nd Airborne Division, making me responsible for the training, readiness, and deployment of the entire division. 20,000 soldiers who represented America's primary rapid response capability. The position required testifying before Congress about military readiness, coordinating with foreign military leaders about joint operations, and managing relationships with defense contractors, government agencies, and international organizations that supported division operations. It was work that utilized every aspect of my education, experience, and leadership capabilities while contributing to strategic planning that would influence American military policy for decades. But when I tried to explain the significance of this assignment to my family, their responses suggested that they saw it as evidence of my continued inability to prioritize personal happiness over professional achievement. "Carmen's promotion sounds very impressive," my sister Isabella said, "but doesn't it mean even more time away from family and even less opportunity to build personal relationships? When will you have time to think about marriage and children?" The questions were familiar but painful because they revealed how little my family understood about the satisfaction I found in military service and the sense of purpose that came from contributing to something larger than personal fulfillment. But I was also beginning to feel the isolation that came from achieving success that couldn't be shared with the people whose opinions mattered most to me. My professional achievements were celebrated by military colleagues and recognized by senior government officials, but they remained invisible to family members who couldn't appreciate their significance. The appointment as Commanding General of the 82nd Airborne Division came during my 18th year of service, when I was selected to lead the entire division. 25,000 soldiers, and the most elite rapid response capability in the American military. At 38, I became the youngest person ever appointed to command the 82nd Airborne Division, the first Latina woman to hold the position, and one of only a few generals to achieve such senior rank before age 40. The appointment was covered extensively by national media, with articles describing my background in intelligence analysis, my combat leadership experience, and my rapid advancement through increasingly responsible positions. The coverage included profiles that highlighted my role in developing new approaches to rapid deployment, counterinsurgency operations, and international military cooperation that had become standard practices throughout the Army. But my family's understanding of what this appointment meant remained limited by their lack of familiarity with military organization or the significance of commanding one of America's most important military units. Carmen got another promotion. My father told relatives, "She's really moved up in the Army, but we still hope she'll find time to think about personal priorities eventually." The response was loving but revealed how little they understood about what I was actually doing or why anyone outside our family would consider it important. As commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division, I was responsible for maintaining America's ability to respond to international crises within 48 hours, for training soldiers who would deploy to the world's most dangerous locations, and for developing military capabilities that would protect American interests for years to come. The work required meeting with the President about deployment decisions, coordinating with allied military leaders about joint operations, and making strategic decisions that would determine how American military power was employed in response to global threats. But these responsibilities remained largely invisible to family members who continued to see my career as evidence of my continued focus on professional achievement that prevented me from building the kind of personal life they valued. The breakthrough in my family's understanding came unexpectedly, through my nephew Miguel's achievement rather than my own recognition. Miguel was my brother Carlos's son, a bright and ambitious high school student who had been accepted to several excellent universities and was preparing to graduate with honors from Roosevelt High School in San Antonio. The graduation ceremony was planned as a major family celebration, with relatives traveling from across Texas to witness Miguel's achievement. I had planned to attend in dress uniform, representing the military tradition that had become an important part of our family's story even if it wasn't fully understood or appreciated by everyone. The graduation ceremony was being held at the Alamo Dome, with several thousand students, families, and distinguished guests attending to celebrate the achievements of San Antonio's largest graduating class. The keynote speaker was General Martin Anderson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who had been invited to address the graduating class about service, leadership, and the importance of contributing to something larger than personal success. I had worked with General Anderson on several strategic planning projects during my Pentagon assignment, but I hadn't expected him to recognize me in the audience of families and graduates. But during his address about the importance of military service and the young leaders who were shaping America's security capabilities, he paused and began speaking about the officers who exemplified the leadership principles he was describing. Among the military leaders who represent the future of American security, he said, scanning the audience, is someone in this audience who has distinguished herself as one of the Army's most capable strategic thinkers and operational commanders. I felt my heart stop as murmurs rippled through the audience and people began looking around to see who he was referring to. General Carmen Martinez, he continued, if you're here, would you please stand so we can recognize your extraordinary leadership of the 82nd Airborne Division? The silence that followed seemed to last forever. I could feel my family members looking at me with confusion, unsure whether they had heard correctly or what they were supposed to understand about what was happening. Finally, Miguel, who was sitting with the graduating students, spotted me in the family section and called out loudly enough for half the arena to hear, "That's my Tia Carmen. That's my aunt." I stood slowly, my dress uniform suddenly feeling heavier as the Alamo Dome erupted in applause that seemed to echo forever among the arena's walls. General Anderson was beaming at me from the podium, gesturing for the audience to continue their ovation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said when the applause finally died down, "General Martinez commands the 82nd Airborne Division, America's premier rapid response force. Under her leadership, the division has achieved readiness levels that exceed any previous standards and has developed operational capabilities that are being adopted throughout the Army. The audience erupted again, but I was focused on my family members, who were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to something that might have been awe. More importantly, General Anderson continued, General Martinez represents what it means to serve with distinction while maintaining the values and connections that keep us grounded in the communities we protect. She reminds us that leadership isn't just about rank or authority, it's about using your capabilities to serve something larger than yourself. As the final applause died down and I sat back down, the area around my family had fallen completely silent. Extended family members were staring at me as if seeing a stranger, trying to process information that challenged everything they thought they knew about me. My brother Carlos was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Carmen, you're really a general? You really command the 82nd Airborne Division? Yes, Carlos. I am. My mother reached across two other family members to grab my hand, tears streaming down her face. Mija, we had no idea. We thought you were just a regular soldier, working in some office somewhere. I am a soldier, Mama. But I'm also responsible for 25,000 other soldiers and the mission that keeps America ready to respond to threats anywhere in the world. The conversation that followed continued through the reception after the graduation ceremony, with family members asking questions about my career that revealed how little they had understood about what I had been doing for the past 20 years. When you said you were working in intelligence, my father said, we thought you meant you were filing reports or doing computer work. We didn't realize you were briefing the president and making strategic decisions. When you talked about leading soldiers, Miguel added, we thought you meant you were in charge of a small group of people. We didn't realize you were commanding an entire division. The most meaningful conversation came with my sister Isabella, who had always been supportive but had never understood why I had chosen such a demanding career path. Carmen, she said, pulling me aside during the reception, I need to apologize. I've spent years thinking that your military career was preventing you from having a normal life, that you were sacrificing personal happiness for professional achievement. Isabella, you don't need to apologize. You were concerned about my happiness, and that came from love. But I was wrong about everything. While I was worried about you not having a conventional life, you were building an extraordinary life. While I thought you were just playing soldier, you were actually becoming one of the most important soldiers in America. The revelation at Miguel's graduation ceremony transformed my family relationships in ways that were both wonderful and complicated. Extended family members who had pitted me for decades suddenly wanted to hear detailed stories about military operations. Relatives who had spoken about me with gentle concern began introducing me to their friends as our family's general. But the most meaningful change was in my relationship with the younger generation of family members, who began to see my life as an example of what was possible rather than as a cautionary tale about the costs of pursuing unconventional dreams. Miguel, inspired by the intersection of military service and strategic leadership he had witnessed, began asking questions about military academies, about the education required for military intelligence, and about the possibility of combining his interests in international relations with military service. Tia Carmen, he said during a family dinner 6 months after his graduation ceremony, I want to serve my country the way you have. Can you tell me about how you knew that military service was the right path for you? The conversation that followed was unlike any I had ever had with family members, focused on the intersection of personal calling and national service, on the satisfaction that comes from leading people in missions that matter, and on the different ways that young people could contribute to protecting the values and freedoms that define American society. 2 years later, when Miguel graduated from West Point and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army, the family response was completely different from what I had experienced 20 years earlier. Instead of concerns about unconventional career choices and uncertain prospects, there were thoughtful questions about military specializations, practical discussions about the intersection of military service and civilian careers, and obvious pride in having another family member choosing to serve in uniform. Miguel is following in Carmen's footsteps, my mother said with obvious pride, choosing a career that will let him serve his country and develop leadership skills that will benefit him throughout his life. The contrast with my own experience was stark and gratifying. Miguel would pursue his military career with family support and understanding, without having to choose between authenticity and acceptance, without having to defend his choices to people who couldn't appreciate their significance. 3 years after the graduation ceremony revelation, I was selected for promotion to Lieutenant General, making me responsible for all airborne and special operations forces in the U.S. Army, a position that required coordinating with multiple military services, allied nations, and government agencies to maintain America's rapid response capabilities. The promotion ceremony was held at the Pentagon, with my entire extended family invited to witness the recognition of achievements they now understood and celebrated. In my promotion speech, I talked about the importance of family support in military careers, about the values that sustain soldiers during difficult deployments, and about the responsibility that comes with leading America's sons and daughters in missions that protect our national interests. The work I have had the privilege of doing, I concluded, would not have been possible without the foundation of values that my family provided: hard work, dedication to something larger than yourself, and the understanding that service to others is the highest calling anyone can pursue. After the ceremony, at the reception held in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, my grandmother approached me with obvious emotion. At 89, she had insisted on making the difficult journey to Washington because, she said, she needed to witness this recognition of achievements she had finally learned to understand and appreciate. Mija, she said, taking my hands in hers, when you were little and you spent all your time reading about wars and soldiers, I worried that you would never learn to focus on building a family and staying close to home. Now I understand that you were preparing to protect all of our families. Abuela, serving in the military has never taken me away from family values. It's helped me understand how important those values are and why they're worth protecting. I know that now, Mija. What I want you to know is that our entire family has learned from watching your journey. We've learned that supporting someone's dreams doesn't require understanding those dreams immediately. It requires trusting that the person you love has vision and capabilities that might lead to something extraordinary. For years after the graduation revelation, when my great-nephew announced that he wanted to attend the Air Force Academy because he wanted to serve his country like Tia Carmen, the family response was immediate and enthusiastic support. David wants to follow Carmen's example and serve in the military, my father told neighbors with obvious pride. Our family has developed quite a tradition of military service, and we couldn't be more proud of the young people who are choosing to serve their country. The transformation in how my family understood military service, leadership, and the value of choosing challenging careers was complete. They had learned that the person who seems to be playing games might actually be changing the rules of the game itself. 5 years after becoming a lieutenant general, I was selected for promotion to general, 4-star rank, making me one of the highest-ranking officers in the U.S. military and responsible for strategic planning that would shape American defense policy for decades. The promotion was covered extensively by national and international media, with articles describing my role in developing new approaches to rapid deployment, international cooperation, and the integration of conventional and special operations forces. But the coverage that meant the most to me appeared in the San Antonio Express-News, my hometown newspaper, which ran a feature story about the local girl who had grown up to become one of America's most senior military leaders. The article included interviews with my former teachers, including Sergeant Williams from my high school ROTC program, who described my early leadership potential and dedication to military service. It featured quotes from Pentagon colleagues who spoke about my strategic thinking and operational expertise. Most importantly, it included extensive comments from my family members, who spoke with obvious pride about achievements they now understood and celebrated. We always knew Carmen was special, my mother was quoted as saying, but we didn't understand that her dreams of military service were actually preparing her to become one of America's most important military leaders. While we were worried about her not having a conventional life, she was building an extraordinary life dedicated to protecting all of us. My father's quote captured the transformation in his understanding even more directly. Carmen never was playing soldier. She was preparing to become the kind of soldier that other soldiers look up to. The article's conclusion, written by a journalist who had followed my career for several years, summarized what my journey represented for other young people with dreams that seemed impossible to their families. General Carmen Martinez's story reminds us that the people who seem to be playing games are often the ones who understand the rules better than anyone else. While others see uniforms and ceremonies, she saw leadership opportunities and the chance to serve something larger than herself. Her family's journey from confusion to pride mirrors America's own evolution in understanding that our military leaders come from every community and every background, united by the commitment to protect and defend the values that define our nation. Reading that article with my family gathered around the same kitchen table where I had first tried to explain my interest in military service, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond any professional recognition. The 8-year-old girl who had been fascinated by military strategy at the Alamo had become responsible for developing the strategies that would protect American interests around the world. The college student who had been warned about the challenges of military careers had overcome those challenges while building a career that exceeded everyone's expectations. But most importantly, my family had learned that supporting someone's dreams isn't about understanding those dreams immediately. It's about trusting that the person you love has capabilities and vision that might eventually lead to achievements that exceed everyone's expectations. 7 years after my promotion to general, I was appointed as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, making me the highest-ranking military officer in the United States and the principal military advisor to the President, Secretary of Defense, and National Security Council. At 45, I became the youngest person ever appointed to this position, the first Latina to serve as chairman, and the culmination of a military career that had begun with a young girl's fascination with military strategy and evolved into responsibility for the entire U.S. military. The appointment ceremony was held at the White House, with the president himself administering the oath of office while my family, military colleagues, and government officials witnessed the historic moment. In my acceptance remarks, I spoke about the importance of military service in protecting democratic values, about the responsibility that comes with leading America's military forces, and about the family relationships that sustain military personnel during the most challenging assignments. The work I do today, I said, looking out at an audience that included the family members who had finally learned to understand and support my choices, builds on everything I learned growing up in San Antonio, the importance of hard work, the value of serving others, and the understanding that the greatest achievements come from dedicating yourself to something larger than personal success. After the ceremony, as I stood in the Oval Office with the President, discussing strategic challenges that would shape American military policy for years to come, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from backyard war games to the highest levels of military leadership. The young woman who had been told that military service was just a phase had made it her life's calling. The officer who had been seen as playing soldier had become the soldier that others looked to for leadership and strategic vision. But most importantly, I had learned that the people who love you most are often the ones who understand you least, until circumstances force them to see beyond their assumptions and recognize capabilities they never knew existed. 8 years after becoming chairman of the Joint Chiefs, when my great-great-niece announced that she wanted to attend West Point because she wanted to serve her country like her tia Carmen, the family response captured how completely our understanding of success and service had evolved. Sophia wants to follow Carmen's path and become a military leader, my nephew Miguel, now a colonel himself, told family friends with obvious pride. Our family has learned that the military isn't just a career, it's a calling that produces leaders who protect and defend everything we value. Today, as I prepare for the transition ceremony that will pass the responsibilities of chairman to my successor, I think about how different this moment might have been if my family had understood from the beginning what I was trying to accomplish through military service. But I'm also grateful for the lesson that their initial skepticism taught me. That the most important validation comes from within, from the knowledge that you're using your capabilities to serve something larger than yourself, regardless of whether that service is immediately understood or appreciated by those closest to you. The work I've had the privilege of leading, commanding elite soldiers, developing strategic policies that protect American interests, advising presidents on the use of military force, has been its own reward, independent of family approval or public recognition. But having that approval and recognition now, after decades of working without it, feels like an honor that makes all the challenging moments worthwhile. Most importantly, my family has learned that the uniform doesn't make the soldier makes the uniform legendary. They've learned that the person who seems to be playing games might actually be the one who understands the rules better than anyone else. They've learned that military service isn't about avoiding civilian responsibilities, it's about accepting the ultimate civilian responsibility of protecting and defending the Constitution and the values that define American society. If my story resonates with you today, if you've ever been underestimated because others couldn't see past their assumptions, I want you to know that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to understand your choices. The work you're called to do, the service you can provide, the leadership you can offer, these have value regardless of who recognizes them immediately. Drop a comment below sharing your own experiences with being underestimated or having your ambitions dismissed as impractical. How did you find the courage to pursue goals that others couldn't understand? What dreams are you working toward that might seem impossible to people around you? And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about the power of perseverance and service, please share this story with them. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your calling in service to others, about the courage it takes to pursue excellence when others don't understand your vision, and about the moment when the people who questioned your choices finally understand that you were preparing for something extraordinary all along. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the people who seem to be playing games are actually changing the rules of the game itself, and the uniform doesn't make the soldier makes the uniform legendary.